We probably have time for one more department head this evening, and then we will recess and reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
So next up is County Clerk and Elections. Their budgets are on page 133 and page 72.
Good afternoon. Kathy Darling Allen, Shasta County Clerk and Registrar of Voters. Nothing has changed on this slide in quite some time. Staffing changes, understanding and program changes. I'm not going to read what's on the slide to you. Understanding how the budget calendar works might be helpful. You probably are already aware, most of the folks on the dais and in this room, but for the general clarification, I'll just say that budget kickoff was in February. We presented information to this board at the end of February and also at the end of March regarding the hand tally conversation. Final budget documents were due to the auditor on March 29th, the day after the March 28th board meeting, when the board directed us to create a hand tally plan. So this budget was created with the best information that we had available in February and March, which means we know that it will change. We have a lot of learning and real life experience to gain through the next couple of elections, hand tallying those. We did get authority from this board in April and finally executed a contract in May for new voting equipment. That is in our office along with the old voting equipment. We're playing Tetris in our office right now. Let's see. A colleague asked me about 3 weeks ago how many hours a week I'm spending working on manual tally, and I explained to them that the only thing I have worked on since January 25th is this project and staff evaluations. It is having a similar effect on other members of my staff and their ability to get the other duties that we have in our office accomplished. And that's clear in the goals section here. We had several goals we had planned to accomplish this year that have all had to be backburnered, essentially. Happy to answer questions.
Do we have any questions for our Register of Voters? Earlier, ROV Allen, someone had asked a question about your trips to Arizona, Chicago, DC, and so I just wanted to ask you, were those paid for by the county or outside agencies, or what did that look like, since somebody brought it up earlier today?
Are you going to be asking other department heads who's paying for their trips?
Yep, we'll get there, yep.
All of them?
Well, I'm asking you right now.
Sure. So, not sure exactly which trip to Arizona you're talking about. The county paid for both trips I took to Arizona in 2022. The trip I took to DC 3 weeks ago was paid for by the nonprofit who hosted that event. And then what else? Chicago? Chicago. Well, which time I've been to Chicago more than once.
I didn't know. Well, how many times have you been to Chicago?
I don't know. Maybe Kevin can tell us. He's asked for my travel records.
Well, I'm asking you. I'm not asking Kevin.
Well, I don't have my calendar in front of me, and as usual, no one's given me questions in advance to answer. So I can't answer that question, except to tell you the most recent trip to Chicago that I took within, I took one trip in February, one trip in May. In February, the county paid. In May, the nonprofit who invited me paid.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Craig.
How much work was accomplished on the hand counting process while in Washington, D.C. for those 3 or 4 days?
Quite a bit, actually.
Okay. In this process, it's been stated that there was 1,300 employees needed to hand count. And I understand that number to be far less than 600 now. Is that correct?
Are we talking about the November 23 election? Are we talking about March of '24, November of '24. Every election has different items on the ballot. The number of hand counting staff that we will need for each election is going to be determined by the election itself. I'm getting there.
Oh, I cleared my throat.
I'm sorry, it looked like you were about to speak.
No, I'm sorry.
So we anticipate for our highest turnout election, which is of course the general presidential election next November in '24, that we will need about 550 folks counting at any given time. There are 2 discrete hand counting periods that will happen. The first will happen right after election night. We will begin counting all ballots, right? We can't count anything prior to 8 p.m. on election night. So we'll begin counting those precinct votes that come back to our central location at 8 o'clock on election night, and we will count with a staff of about 500. We'll also have supervisors and other folks on board, but the tally staff, I believe, is about 500. And then they will work 6, maybe 8 hours, and they will go home, and another crew will come in. The code says we must count without ceasing until all those election day ballots are completely counted.
It does not give a number, though, correct? So when you say it's 500, you don't have to have 500 people counting in the middle of the night, though. That's a decision you're making, correct?
I'm trying to make sure that the ballots are counted in a timely way to report to the state.
And yeah, absolutely.
So
But
what
I'm
we're
just
doing
saying-
when we're doing these calculations is we're backing into the number of hours we have to count the ballots. So the first time period is 36 hours, from Tuesday night at 8 p.m. to Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Thursday morning at 8 a.m., we're going to start counting vote by mail ballots and do some other processing. So that is when we will start basically 9 to 5, or 8 to 5 rather, Monday through Friday. But that Tuesday to Thursday, we have to run continuously until we're done. If it turns out that we're finished at 3 o'clock in the morning, then that third shift that was going to come in at 6 a.m. will get called off.
And when you talk about the
Or we'll have them open vote by mail ballots.
Now, when you talk about the supervisors, the Secretary of State has said there needs to be 4 people counting those ballots. It does not say it needs a 5th employee as a supervisor.
It says it needs a
Okay,
supervisor for every 4 counting boards.
Okay.
That's in the regulations.
So that's the regulations put forth, but
Correct.
as I, okay, well, let's skip that. We'll table that for a second. Are you going to be going and speaking at the hearing that they're having about this process? Because it does dramatically impact the budget, and you being in this seat of 20 years. Now, granted, your experience of 20 years as the clerk, you've never hand counted in this capacity because it hasn't been done since the late 70s, correct?
In the late 70s, this county had 46,000 voters.
Correct, but I'm saying this is
So it wouldn't have
completely,
been done then either.
this is completely new to you.
This is
Like
completely new to everyone.
everybody, exactly. So in a collaborative effort, will you be seeking, working with other individuals at the Secretary of State and at the hearing to make sure we do this in an efficient and cost-effective way?
I wasn't aware a hearing had been called. Part of the regulatory adoption process allows for a hearing. A hearing was not scheduled as part of the promulgation of regulations in this case. If a voter requests a hearing, there will be a hearing held. But as far as I know, that hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't been announced yet, but there will be a hearing.
Okay.
I mean, wouldn't you?
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so it's no
And
surprise
I would
when I
plan,
say.
and I will plan to attend, yes.
And so if this board comes up with some questions, are we able to work with you to ensure that from a budgetary and fiduciary standpoint, we're able to run this as transparently, honest, and inexpensive as possible? Are you committed to that, to making sure this?
You mean the way that I've done my job for the last 20 years, Kevin?
I'm just asking this one particular, this is my first budget hearing.
So, yes, we have a track record in our department for my entire career of working within our means. We do have contingency plans in elections. There was a lot of talk at the beginning of this hearing about padded budgets and over budgeting. In elections, we have to be prepared to solve those emergencies on a dime.
So are you saying the sheriff doesn't have to prepare for emergencies on a dime?
I'm not here to compare myself to anyone. That's your job.
You just asked hold on,
That's
you just
your
asked Chair Jones if he was going to ask about travel.
I did.
So it's just the same exact field. I'm just saying, if we're going to bring up other departments, I think it's only fair to say other departments we're asking that same question in terms of contingencies. The contingency built in is how the dollar amount started at 1.3 million and now is being touted as 3 or 4 million. It's going up when realistically that number is plummeting down. And my question again is just making sure that we are
Realistic,
committed.
the number is plummeting down?
Well, it is. It's not going to take
How? How do you
1,300
figure
people.
that?
It's not going to take 1,300 people. We know it's not going to take 1,300 people.
So how do we know that?
Well, I'm going by with what you've said. You've said it's not going to take your earlier.
Not 1,300 at once, no, but in succession, again, in that 36-hour period between Tuesday night and Thursday morning, if I have 500 people come in and then 8 hours later I have 500 more come in and then later I can get way past 1,300 people in that 36 hours.
The math isn't going to take that many, but that's okay. Time will tell.
So, exactly.
tell.
And the math that we're doing is based on our experience in the profession.
But the experience that you just said this hasn't been done before. So you can't pull on experience when it's never been done. Experience of what? And that's what I'm saying. Because I know I can see what's happening at the Secretary of State level. And the process is to make this as cumbersome and as expensive as humanly possible. And I see it.
I can't answer for the state.
I know you can't. And that's why I said time will tell. I'll yield to Supervisor Rickard.
Supervisor Rickard.
Okay. I am troubled, and I really, really struggle with where are you going to find all these people to count these votes in Shasta County? We've just heard we can't find engineers, we can't find appraisers. What have we done? And I'm not asking you, this is a rhetorical question. What the heck have we done here? What kind of monster have we created? And are we going to be liable? Are we going to be sued if we can't pull this off? I mean, this is something of huge magnitude in my mind, that we have disenfranchised our voters in Shasta County to go to this other system. There was no planning, no foresight. It's just ridiculously reckless and irresponsible. And I'm really, really troubled, and my heart goes out to you because you've been put in an absolutely impossible situation. I'm sorry, I'm just it's beyond words.
Supervisor Garma.
Supervisor Rickard, I'm going to kind of follow suit. It's been an ugly meeting today, and I'm apologizing for the way this board has treated you.
Thank
It is not okay for you guys to ask her questions and you didn't ask anybody else. The way you are treating our registrar of voters is disgusting on this board, and I don't care for it. And I have that right to say it up here in the dais, and I apologize. If you're going to ask one person, ask every single one. Get Mr. Hellman back up here, get them all back up here, ask them where their trips went. Because you guys are singling her out. That is disgusting. You may not agree with her, but you have to have a level of respect that I feel like is completely gone off of this dais. And I'd like to see us bring it back, because we're talking earlier about treating people. It matters how you treat people. Whether you agree or not, have a civil conversation, and I want to see it brought back.
Supervisor Cray.
So there's two comments I want to unpack there, Supervisor Rickard. You're equating, and because this is budget related, you're equating engineers and surveyors to people counting votes as employees in terms of what we're looking for. I just want to make sure that I clarify that. I just want to make sure. And then, Ms. Allen, you had said in D.C. that you're one of your greatest fears. I don't want to exactly quote this, but this is going to be paraphrased. One of your greatest fears is that you'll be successful in November because it will give this board and a community false hope that you'll be able to do it in March. Is that correct?
I did say that, and I am very concerned about that. And I want to be very clear that my concern is not that I'm going to be successful in November. I know we're going to be successful in November because of the number of voters we expect to participate in that election. My concern isn't about being successful in November. My concern is that sets us up for an unrealistic expectation when we get to March and November, especially next year. In 2020, we had 94,000 people cast ballots in Shasta County. The next highest turnout election, I think, was 88,000. Okay. So we are Shasta County, we want our voices heard. We outpace the state and turn out every single election.
And I think every single person up here wants everyone's voice heard. And one thing I'll say also is you know, I see that, I look at that different, because we're talking about budget and mindset shift. And as we talk about the oil tanker turning, the mindset to me, and this is where I do have confidence, because you're going to have now institutional, boots on the ground, firsthand knowledge in November, and your 20 years of process. I think you'll be successful in March.
And an amazing team who will make it work.
Well, yeah.
At what cost? But
see,
go ahead.
Well, correct. And that's, and I know Supervisor Garment, I'm gonna clap back a little bit.
Go ahead, I'll
because
clap right back at you, bud.
Well, I'm being respectful, but what I'm saying is you haven't asked one budget question yet in a budget hearing. You're talking about backpacks and other stuff. But when it comes to the dialogue we're having, we're talking about a process that is going to be highly scrutinized, and it's important to me that we have the best financial foot forward and everybody rowing in the same direction for the outcome of not disenfranchising voters, making sure individuals with disabilities can vote freely, fairly, independently, and again, making sure that it's done appropriately within the budget. And we have an opportunity right now because the Secretary of State is setting these. So these budget hearings that will come forward, this is where, and I know you're nodding because you agree, and we've talked about this, is the strongest clerks in the state, this is when they need to rally and help counties get the local control to go this direction, because we are the first, but we definitely won't be the last. But we will be if the state makes it so crushingly financial impossible. Because again, we're looking at AB 969, and AB 969 is what's taking us down the road of taking away local control. And if making it so expensive is one of the ways they're doing that, I hope in a budget hearing meeting, we're doing everything we can to make sure we're protecting those tax dollars.
So we have a 20-year history of giving money back. That's where I was trying to go when I started talking about contingency planning and
Yeah.
budgeting. We never, well, I don't want to say never, because that's an absolute term that I may not be able to back up. I cannot think of a budget year where we overspent in elections. County clerk is a little bit different. It's a much smaller budget unit and a little bit harder to finagle sometimes. But elections, we have a long history of being very prudent with our dollars and stewarding tax dollars in the way that we feel is responsible. We do not overspend. You will not come to my office and find 75 crates of paper in 75 colors sitting around waiting for someone to. That's not how we run our ship.
Yeah, and I don't have, and I wouldn't put Ms. Short on the hot seat to ask. I don't know your budget year over year in terms of what you've returned. I mean, if you've returned, a few $1,000 because you estimated a 2 or 3% contingency, I'd say, man, that's nails. But if you're overestimating with a contingency of up to 10, 20%, which some departments have, I'm not going to celebrate being so out of touch with a budget that you're constantly giving this money back, and we're going to say, hey, way to go, you returned all this money. Well, you shouldn't have budgeted in the first place.
So
Stephanie-
tell me how many pages my ballot's going to be in March next year. Can you tell me that?
It'll probably have 30 to 40 contests.
And how
Supervisor
many
Cry, and I
pages?
apologize, Kathy Darling Allen,
Yeah,
I apologize.
Stephanie, how close are we to our hard break?
We need a hard break now. My advice, though, is we do have to open all the other agencies.
Okay.
And get to them first to continue those budget hearings as well. And again, I apologize for the interruption, but I want to make sure that we take care of our system as well as taking care of continuing all the other agencies as well.
Sure.
So we will open up the meeting, a regular scheduled meeting of the Housing Authority. We will also open up the regular meeting of the in-home support services. We will open up the regular meeting of the Water Agency. Am I missing any others, Stephanie?
I believe you got them all. Housing Authority, In-Home Support Services, Public Authority, and Water Agency. Yep.
Okay, so we've opened all those up, and now
And
for,
Council, if I may, Council, are we able to do that all at once, or do we
Chair
have to do it one at a time?
Chair Jones, I would recommend that you do them one at a time, that you make the statement that you do not receive additional compensation or stipend, and that you recess and continue it to tomorrow, June 7th at 9 a.m. where soon thereafter it can be heard.
Okay, so with regards to the water agency, we,
Quickly,
Stipend for acting as the board in those three agencies.
exactly what Mr. Ross said.
can I finish my sentence?
Please.
Just quickly. So ballot printing is one of the most expensive items in our budget. It's over $100,000 for every election. So if an election, because of the candidates who come in to file for office, pushes that ballot to 2 cards, that's not something we have any control over. So we're always going to be over budget if we don't go to 2 cards, because we try and budget for 2 cards for every election that we hold. So you may not want to give me kudos for that, but I give myself
Oh,
kudos
it's
for
not
being
that I wanna-
prepared
yeah.
to serve the voters.
It's not that I want to give you kudos. That's why with Matt and that agency, which I know that you've had a meeting and at the time CEO or acting interim CEO Mary Williams. That's why I think it's important to bring in people that, I mean, that especially that organization, which I don't remember the name of it offhand.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, excuse me. I don't mean to interrupt, but the meeting has been recessed.
All right.
So
We'll